Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This episode I sit down with Carl. We talk about what Carl sees people doing wrong out there in the archery world. He's a competitive archer, and so he pays more attention to the finer details. And I pick his brain all the time when we're on the line shooting, and just really get a lot of good information from guys like Carl. And so he comes on the show, talks about some common mistakes, things that to look for in your shooting process, and just a good conversation about archery and how to improve. Before we start the show, though, just wanted to remind everybody that we do have a mailing list that's going to go active here in summer, and really excited about it. But if you haven't signed up for it, you can do so at www.onpointpodcast.com, and then there should be an automatic pop-up thing that says if you want to, ask you if you want to sign up, or there's a tab on the right that says sign up. It's not going to be a bunch of spam. It's maybe one email a month. And, for folks that want to get more in-depth, good offers on equipment that I'm using or believe in, and then keep updated with the content that's coming out, it's going to be a good resource for you. So check that out. And it's been also a while since I've reminded folks that, the iTunes reviews, somehow in the algorithm world of iTunes and stuff, I'm sure reviews play a role, and so if you have time to go leave a 5-star review, if you feel that I've earned it, be happy to have that. Comments are always welcome, so I can see what you like, what you didn't like, and really help me grow from there. But that's all I got, guys, so we'll see you on the next one. Bye. Well, I'm going to turn mine down just a little bit more. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Carl, thanks for coming back, man.
No problem, Gary.
So we actually got quite a few compliments from our last episode. God, I'm trying to my mom, like, what was? Oh yeah, better archery through aggressive spending, and
yep.
Guys absolutely love that quote.
I've used it for years.
Not only is it a philosophy, it's a catchy title.
Right.
But so we're gonna kind of go back over things today. You've still been shooting. You went to Reading and everything. Had a good time over at Reading.
Oh yeah.
And I was kind of just actually got quite a few questions the last couple weeks. Guys struggling with their setup, struggling with the tune, and then also struggling with their shot process. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, well, that would be kind of cool to get Carl back on here, and then he can talk about some of the things that he sees instead of just having guys, listen to me all episode. And I'm always down to learn from you, man. I've learned a ton from you just shooting with you, having you just kind of point things out or pick your brain as I struggle with maybe a particular thing one day,
right.
Or why in the heck am I doing this when I'm doing this kind of thing.
Sure.
So it's going to be a good episode. I'm excited to hear some of the things that you say. So
sounds good.
So how did Reading go for you?
Oh man, Reading was rough this year. I went down there feeling pretty well, on Tuesday before we left, I felt really confident, shooting lots of good arrows, and then Wednesday I took the day off work, wanted to go out and get just one more last little good practice session in, make sure my marks were dialed in as good as they could be, and well, let's just say after 6 hours out at the range, my marks were not where they were on Tuesday, and I do not know what changed. I have slammed my head against the wall trying to figure it out. I do not know still.
How big of an elevation change is it over there in humidity and climate?
I would say the heat was a little bit higher. We didn't have the wind down there that we've had here in the valley lately, which... And I don't know. I do know guys come to Reading with a certain set of marks that's only for Reading compared to where they come from,
really?
From around the world.
That kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're competing at that level and you're going to be shooting there for that many days, and you know that you're going to be changing, why not have your own?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I still have multiple spot hog sites with dovetails that I got them loaned out to friends right now so they can try them out, but. Different arrow setups, so I don't have to change. Even though it's just a lot of times it's just a sight tape,
right?
But maybe I just want to shoot that arrow for a day and then shoot that arrow directly over and not have to re-sight in at all.
And and I don't change stuff. Once I get something I really like, I just stick with it. And so it would probably benefit me to put a sight tape on there so I could just adjust the arrow on the side of my sight just a little bit to bring it back in play. Because like Thursday at Reading, we shot the Pro-Am and I shot pretty well. And then Thursday morning happened. My first target, I was about 4 yards low
Really?
off my sight marks. And I never could catch up. I lost 19 points on Friday just because of low.
Really?
Oh, it was terrible.
And did you ever kind of figure out what was going on there?
Just kept adding yards to it until
Really?
it finally got somewhere middle-ish.
Yeah.
And then luckily my buddy invited me over to his house or Friday night. So went over there and shot 2 new good sight marks. And Saturday was better. Still not ideal. Sunday was a little bit better. Still not ideal, but
Yeah.
always learning.
Were you holding good and everything?
Oh, shooting good, executing good shots. I
Yeah.
didn't execute any bad shots.
You know, that can be really frustrating when you're doing that. But for me, I was shooting over at the coast. Was it? I think it was last year, and I kind of was joking around. It sounded kind of douchey when I said it, but I was actually serious. I'm like, I'm shooting great, but something about my setup's off today.
Oh yeah,
But I'm like, I'm shooting great, and guys are like, kind of like, well, that's kind of doesn't make sense. Like, you're not shooting a very good score today, but you're shooting great, but the bow's not. I'm like, actually, yeah. As stupid as that sounds, I feel great about the execution of the shots I'm making today.
totally.
Left totally happy. Shot the worst score I ever shot, but as a shot executioner, I felt good that day. You know, so that's kind of like what you had going on.
You know, I shot 3 days. I didn't punch any arrows. I didn't shoot any arrows that weren't. The pin wasn't in the dot.
How'd you do on the 100-yard one or the Bigfoot?
Well, back to my sight mark issue. So
Low.
I went out to my buddy's house, and he could only get like 60-plus yards at his house.
Uh-huh.
Well, 60 and 100 is a long difference.
Right.
And so, you know, my first arrow broke really well, and my spotter says, no, but it's down by the 10 line. And I'm like, oh, no. So I look at it, and sure enough, it's outside the 10 line, which
Really?
is something I absolutely despise doing, but it happens. And so I added a yard and a half to it because at that range, you know, just swagging.
Mm-hmm.
And my second arrow broke good and just under the dot. So
That's frustrating.
next year.
And then your wife Tia, she did a personal best over there too.
She did a personal best, improved by 23 or 28 points, which
That's
is
killer. It's been fun watching her grow as an archer.
Oh, it's been awesome.
Yeah, you know, back when she started, and then she was shooting. Now you know what she was shooting, but now she was like shooting 260s to 280s at league. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's pretty solid from where she started. Like really solid from where she started.
And then going to Vegas last year, and she threw down a 290 on the last day, which
Really?
was just awesome.
That's killer.
It was fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, let's go over because you know you kind of went into some things there about going out the bottom of the target is what they call that or whatever, and I've already got some things on my agenda from some of the listeners kind of just talking to me about stuff. So I guess let's start up with common mistakes that you see maybe before we even get to the shooter in setups. Is there anything that you can find that or probably commonly see guys maybe not just doing it just right?
Probably the biggest thing I see is just changing stuff all the time. You know, you got your perpetual tinkerers, which I've been notorious one in the past. You know, that's a whole better archery through aggressive spinning. If it ain't working, spend money. Try to fix it. But when you do find something that works,
right,
just sit on it because it's working. And you get automatic confidence in that. Once you have confidence in something, it's only going to help your shooting.
Right. Well, for something that I had the other day, I had a buddy that was messaging me, and he probably listened to this, so shout out to Jimmy. But he was messaging me. He's like, I can't get my sight to basically dial down. Like I can't. It was a slider sight, and he just couldn't get it to adjust down far enough. He couldn't get it past 30 yards or something like that. I'm like, okay,
at the highest setting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm like, all right. So I'm kind of going over some stuff with them, and is your rest, peep height, how are you anchoring? As I think is how I asked it. Are you finding your peep okay, kind of thing, and kind of went through this whole thing. And so he was just maxing out his sight. He had maxed out his sight just trying to get 30 yards, and I was telling him, I'm like, typically when you're maxing things out, something's out of whack.
Absolutely.
very, I'd say more commonly with probably the bow than the shooter at that point when you're maxing things out, because the shooter can, if they're anchoring properly and everything, it's probably something with the bow or the
Right.
setup. And long story short, it was ended up being peep height. He wasn't paying attention, I guess, and was just anchoring really funny. So I guess what are some other things that because I see peep selection, and for me, I kind of struggle in my own head with that, because in your mind, you shoot indoor and outdoor. You've shot in the rain, probably in the snow.
Oh, yeah.
And so the effects of the light on the peep. Would you talk about that, and then also how to get around that?
Boy, that's kind of a tough one, because what you end up doing is you have to find the happy medium. You're not going to be able to change your peep sight on every single target, every single situation,
Right.
So you got to find a good balance. And what I like to do is, as the sun comes out, your pupil dilates, and so all of a sudden your peep sight looks really big around your scope housing. And so to offset that, you go to a smaller peep. Well, then you get in the dark trees or timber, and then your eyeball gets bigger. Your peep's now ultra small, and you can't barely see your pins in your scope housing. So when I set mine up, I initially set my peep height for what's natural at about 50 yards, because that's the middle of my sight rack. And then from there, I'll put my scope, or I guess just my dovetail, somewhere middle of the rack, because that's where I like to run it. And then I'll adjust my peep size until it just gives me a halo of light around it in normal daylight. That way, when I go into the trees, I still got my full scope inside the peep, and indoors, it still doesn't bleed out on me.
Okay. So are there certain peeps or sight housings that would allow a guy to maybe kind of get more of those adjustments of lighting? Because I know the MRTs on the Spot Hogs, they've got the multi-ring ones, and
Right.
I use the crap out of those now. I think that's I personally think that's one of the best sight ring they've ever came out with, just because it takes an account for, and the first time I shot Hoodoo, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Because I had the sticker.
Right.
And this new MRT has multiple rings. Are there other peeps or other things that you can think of that are out there like that?
Boy, it's not that I know of. I think Spot Hogs got the market cornered on the MRT deal. And very good deal. I spoke with the guys at Spot Hog, and I've thought about running it, but, the one thing I don't like is it's for a big scope housing, like inch and 5/8, inch and 3/4, and I run a far smaller one than that for what I do. So I personally cannot, nor can Tia, because of her draw weight. If we go to a big scope, then she loses out on some of her long marks.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to get arrow clearance issues.
Yep.
So it's all part of the balance.
So a smaller peep, why is it that archers that are competitive shooters go with a smaller peep rather than a hunting size peep?
Usually it's because it will clear up a lens better.
Oh, really?
A smaller peep will clear up before at least maybe a 6 power, depending on your eyes. And or you can go to a larger peep and run a clarifier. A lot of guys don't like running clarifiers because it gets grit and water in it and stuff like that, and then you're kind of up a creek.
Really? Well, that makes sense. I mean, imagine if you're hunting over at the coast or late season blacktail. Yeah. I've been talking about getting my dad one because his eyes are pretty bad nowadays, and when he's wearing his glasses, they fog up on him. And I'm like, maybe a clarifier would be I'm not sure if you can hunt with a clarifier.
Oh, sure.
You can, because it's not a magnifier.
Nope.
And I'm like, man, that might be your ticket, although we would have to make sure it's like hunting with a muzzler. You have to protect that.
Oh, yeah.
From the weather.
Is he having trouble seeing the target or his pins?
He has a hard time focusing on either. His pins are getting pretty blurry when he's focusing on the target.
Because then you'd want to run a verifier.
A verifier.
Which is a negative power rather than a positive power.
Well, I didn't even know that. So go over that for me so I can learn from you right there real quick.
I'm not real big on verifiers. Luckily, I'm getting upper middle age and my eyesight's still fine, so I don't have to.
Yeah.
I have to run a half to a 1 power clarifier to clear up my 5 and 6 power scopes.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to a 4, then I can get away with a small peep. But talking to a few guys in the industry, when your eyes start to get to the point where you can focus on the target, but not your pins just blur out on you,
Mm-hmm.
you can go to a verifier. And it's kind of the opposite effect where it will clear up the pins.
Oh, I
and
see.
Shouldn't affect the target.
So in lamer terms, one would be for short-sighted, one would be for far-sighted kind
Possibly.
of thing. Kind of thing. That makes sense. I see a lot of target guys using the smaller ones and with the smaller housings and everything, and I'm like wondering, like, is that smaller housing, does that just help you focus on target more? Does that kind of eliminate all the things around the target? Because I was thinking that there's got to be a reason. I mean, if it wasn't giving a benefit outside of whatever thing, there has to be a direct benefit to accuracy, or else,
Absolutely.
all these guys wouldn't be using them and stuff.
I guess a small peep allows you to aim small, miss small.
Yeah.
But then again, the trade-off is darkness.
Yeah.
It doesn't let the light in, so.
That makes sense. And then I also want to talk about for guys that like me, a lot of guys like me that they prefer just hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll shoot, and then maybe you'll come into the shop and you'll shoot, and then you're shooting off.
Right.
Okay. And then they adjust,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go back outside, and now I'm left or right, or
Oh, yeah.
you want to go through that real quick with me, because that's a common thing that I see.
It's common for indoor archery, especially because we'll go from Waldron's to Bowtech to Cascadian to Archery World. All these different shops have different lighting situations where the light might be above the target, above the shooter, in between, and it's just the effects of light getting into your eye and alignment.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I've actually firsthand from the little bit of indoor that I've done, just changing lanes.
Oh yes.
And I don't want to. I'm not a scientist or anything, and I want to go over my head here, but I think the term is light refraction, but I'm not.
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that, but that you agree with me. But that's so I feel confident now that you've agreed with me. But so light refraction, kind of, I think maybe. I'm not a scientist, but it basically changes the way that your eye perceives, and versus it's like shooting underwater. It's like bow fishing, so you got to aim under your target. So I'm not saying you need to aim under your target in indoor or anything. I'm just saying it's kind of changing the perception, and it's kind of changing where your arrow hits. And if you go back out to the daylight, that's a different light. And I see guys do that all the time. They're just. And I just leave it where it's at, man. I don't care enough to shoot indoor. I just leave it where it's at.
Well, I mean, shoot with the sun off your right shoulder and then go shoot the other way with the sun off your left shoulder, and you'll see impacts.
Really?
Possibly.
That's interesting. So how do you manage that?
Sometimes I really don't, evidently. When I'm shooting indoors, I just adjust. Every time there's dials on the site, that's what you paid extra for.
Yeah.
Start clicking.
So if I am getting into a shoot off, or you are getting into a shoot off, you've made it, and then you had to change lanes. How's that work? Like, do you get a couple fresh arrows?
No, usually you don't. Usually, well, you might get a warm up end, but
really,
if not, you just gotta hope for the best.
That's crazy. That just seems weird to me. It's like, man. If I'm gonna shoot for a ton of money, I'm gonna shoot in that same lane. Don't fuck with my lane.
Well, if I'm shooting for a ton of money, I'm shooting at a place where the lighting's much more consistent.
Okay.
Also.
Okay. I've always wondered about that. I'm like, man, how are these guys not hitting, just left or right? And does the light really play with left or right mostly, or
Mostly,
is it?
Yeah.
It's not up and down.
No, usually
That's
your
what I've
elevation's
noticed.
pretty consistent.
Yeah. That's what I've noticed. And until I started shooting indoors with you and John and stuff, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
And then it's a real thing.
Yep. Go from lane 2 to 7.
Yeah. I remember one of you guys was talking about, like, goddamn lane or something like that. I'm like, what? You're blaming the lane?
Absolutely.
And then after I shoot a little bit, yeah, it's the lane.
I try to minimize my excuses, but
for sure.
that's always a good one.
So let's get into. Is there anything else on the setup that you see before we move on here?
boy, it's so personal that just because I don't agree with maybe what you have in your setup, it could very well
if
work
it's
for you.
working for you, run it.
Yep.
Kind of thing. I will say that, back to the principle where if you're maxing shit out on your adjustments, something is probably out of whack. And I've learned that a long time ago.
99% of the time I'll agree with that. One time, I'm not going to bag on any manufacturers because they put the R&D into it, but probably 8-9 years ago, I started shooting an Elite for the first time. And the risers on them were quite a bit thicker than what I had shot in the past. So I threw my spot hog sight on there, and I started moving it to the left and moving it to the left and moving it to the left. And holy shit, it's still to the right of the pin. So I ended up having to do some really weird stuff to get it
really
maxed out as far as I could to the left just to get the center shot in.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's certain rests that I've used that will not work, especially with the Hoyts.
The Tech Riser design.
They will not adjust far enough to the left to get you where you need to be. And so that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. With the sights, I haven't really I've run across that with my rest, but I've never really run across that maxing it out with my sight. Actually, there's been plenty of times where I've had to use the L bracket, flip it around the other side on the spot hogs, and then that pushes you like an extra probably a little bit over an eighth of an inch.
Right.
To the left. And you're shaking. You've had to do that too.
I've had to do that too.
And it's solid. There's nothing wrong with it.
Nope. That's what they're
there for.
That's what they're there for.
Yeah. So I want to kind of get into, if I'm a shooter, I'm having troubles on the range, I guess, for lack of better terms. What would in your mind, what are some of the common things that I'd be struggling with?
Maybe footing position, because you're never standing on flat concrete. It's always not going to be perfect. Troubles on the range. If your strings haven't broke in yet, or you got a bad set of strings where they might stretch on you, a little bit of moisture. Maybe your fall-away rest isn't getting out of the way.
I've seen that quite a bit. For most of the guys that I see, it's actually tuning issues out there. I take that back. There's a lot of tuning issues out there. For the most part, it's actually more on the shooter, I would say. And this is coming from a guy who I just watch people shoot. I'm always dissecting what I can get or learn, but I'm always actually watching people shoot. Like, doesn't matter if I know you or not. If you're there, I'm probably, in not a weird, creepy way, I'm checking you out. So if I'm ever at the range, I'm watching you.
Right. Absolutely. That's how you learn. I mean, I've shot with some of the best archers in the world, and I watched them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe in a creepy way. They don't know.
The hairs on the back of their neck are standing out. Carl must be here. So I guess where I'm going with that is some things that I see, and we've talked about this on the podcast, is the shot process is probably number one.
Right.
I'm still in the mindset that 99% of hunters out there have a crap shot process.
If they even have one.
If they even
Legit.
have one. Yeah.
I mean,
what are some things that you look for in a shot process that helps you execute a good shot? Or if I'm out there and I'm just the regular run-of-the-mill guy out there punching the trigger, have my pin on the target, and boom, there I go.
Right.
What would be some things that you would take me from there to get me a little closer to where I should be?
First thing I would recommend is writing down your shot process. Write it down step by step from the time you step on the line, set your feet, knock an arrow, get your hand position in, release clicked on, every single step. And that way when you start to feel something breaking down, you go back over it word for word. And okay, this is what I'm doing. Oh, I'm missing this step. Or I'm not paying enough attention to this step.
I've never done that. That's a really good. Actually, I've done that only because I had probably 2 years ago, I had a guy say, "What is your shot process?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, that's a good question, man." And I'm like thinking about my shot process. I'm like, "The hell is my shot process?"
Right. You just go through the motions.
Yeah.
But are you really going through the motions?
Yeah. And so I went out. I'm like, that's a great question. I'm gonna go to the range. And then I wrote it down. I was like, okay, what am I doing here? And then I kind of bettered myself from writing my own process down, because then I was like, I broke my shooting process down, which allowed me, like you're saying, to know exactly when I was failing to meet that shot process.
And I mean, personally, I don't have mine wrote down, and I should, because
I haven't wrote mine down. Yeah,
awfully hypocritical of me to say you should really do it when I don't have it myself.
Well, I guess when you know it, you know it.
But I also know that when mine breaks down, it's either going to be in my grip or in my anchor all the way through the shot.
Really? Mine would be different.
Really?
Why are yours the way that yours are?
Because I know if I don't get my bow in the same position in my hand every time, because I'm not preloading, and then when I come to anchor, as I'm going through the shot, sometimes I'll come off my face just a little bit, and that's going to go left every time. Or, I might pull down off my face a little bit and push it out the top. So
what do you said preloading? Talk about that real quick.
You load your arrow, you're in position, you're ready to fire the arrow, you click your release on the D-loop or string if you're still shooting off the string, and then you get your grip, you pull the bow back into your grip so you get it right where you want it. And then it shouldn't move from there. Then you go through your whole draw, anchor, fire. You
don't preload?
I preload, yes.
Okay. I didn't know that was a term. I preload every shot.
Right.
Guys, I kind of like, I'll put it like on my knee or my hip, my bottom cam.
Yep.
And then I'll just get a little bit of pressure on there to where it feels right. It feels, it's that very familiar spot. And then I'll shoot just like you said. And I never knew there was actually a term for it.
But you'll see a lot of guys that grip the handle of their bow like it owes them money, and then rip the bow in half and just pound it. And
what effects does grabbing the bow on the shot have, or could it have on your shot?
Oh, huge amounts of bow torque.
Really?
Because all you're doing is grabbing it and steering the riser whichever way you want. And
so you're putting more variables, I guess, into your shot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's something that I see guys do all the time. They're catching their bows, and I'm always wondering, I'm like, that bow's leaving the string, but with the shorter brace heights that we're shooting today, I bet your reflexes are, I bet you grabbing that bow is doing something. It's got to.
And plus, what you're doing is introducing tension into your shot, because you've got all that tension in your forearm and your hand now. So it's never really wanting to settle.
So with your grip, are you kind of angling your wrist forward, or are you just letting the bow put the pressure and then wherever it sits back, like you're making a stop with your hand?
Well, remember the old, like 20 years ago bows, they had a much more high wrist angled grip, which was much more natural. And then over the years, they've kind of went to a much flatter, I guess, upright grip. And I do not shoot that well with a low wrist.
Really?
Because it wants me to really put some weird muscles into it. So on my bows, I went to a high demand archery adjustable grip so I can run a positive angle to it. And I'm really liking that. It allows me to be way more relaxed in the shot.
Well, I noticed that the Reckoning this year comes with two grips. One's a little bit more angled for the high wrist, and then one would kind of let you allow to really get that palm part of it in there, and then let it set against the part of your hand, that the bottom part of your hand, I guess is what it would be doing.
Right.
For hand placement on the grip, would you go over your rules for finding a good grip?
Just the most consistent, relaxed, Like I used to be really steep, like 45, 50 degrees on my knuckles that I could see, and that was a tension inducer for me. So I went to a little more flatter grip now where I can touch all my fingers to the front of the riser, and it's just been quite a phenomenal change.
So this is one that you could find your own lane and kind of just run in it. Like you see a lot of guys with different hand positions,
Absolutely.
Different hand angles coming off the bow. For me, I have my index and my middle finger kind of usually laying on the edge of the riser, on the front edge of the riser, and then my ring and my pinky are kind of just dangling there.
Because, for years, if you look, everybody says, you want your knuckles at a 45-degree angle, and this is how you want to do it, and this is how it has to happen. And then I started watching people, really paying attention to people's grips. And there's a lot of guys that are shooting a much more horizontal or vertical grip, I guess, than what I would have thought to be ideal.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, I wonder what there is to this, because these guys are making money shooting bows, like
Right.
a lot of money.
Right.
So they know something, and I had to try it out myself, and sure enough, it was good.
So I've always heard when you're gripping your bow is that you have that line that kind of runs from your index finger down towards your wrist. It's I'm not sure, it's like your main line crease in your hand. I've always heard you wanted to be on your thumb end of that.
Right.
Is there reasons in your mind why that is an archery principle?
Because it comes down kind of between two muscles, and so it doesn't really want to torque it left or right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you're kind of putting it there in the middle of your hand. It's like a teeter-totter. You have way more tendons, and all your fingers go through that. And when I do use that principle, it just sits in the pocket better. There's a nice big pad on your palm.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I don't really see that common not used. It seems like that's just kind of the natural spot for folks. I'm trying to think of a time where I've actually had to correct somebody that has asked me. I'm not out there correcting people being a dick. But, when somebody's like, hey, what do you think? And I've never really had to correct hand position that much.
No, usually hand position, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. If you're not gripping it like death grip and you're just relaxed, your bow's going to go where it really wants to.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for that, I think we hit the hand position and the grip pretty well. What would be something else that you've seen out there that people could really use some help with on the archery line out there?
Probably making sure your peep height is pretty solid, because it's going to affect your anchor, and that's kind of the second base of accurate shooting.
Right. So for folks out there that want to know if they have a good peep height, things that I'll give one thing that I would do, and you can maybe build off of it, is like, especially when I'm setting up my own bows, I draw and I anchor, and I really focus on getting a good anchor, everything, shoulders, everything standing good, and then I do it with all my eyes closed, and then I open them. Is that what you do?
That's pretty much exactly the same thing I do.
Okay. Is there any other ways that you can really do it? I mean, to me, that's the best, most natural way to find out where your anchor's at.
And have a buddy there helping you that can mark your string or something, because they'll be standing right there with the Sharpie.
Right.
And, okay, that feels good right there. And then Sharpie mark, okay, maybe a little bit higher than that. And
Yeah. Well, and if you already do have your peep in there and it's not tied in yet, your peep side's extremely easy when it's at full draw. So you're not having to fray your string or anything.
Right.
I've done it myself personally, and I've seen guys do it all the time. They'll slide their peep up on their string when there's a lot of pressure on there.
Oh, yeah.
You're fraying your string when you do that. And I am so guilty of that shit. I've done that so many times. I've been out there without a bow press, and I'm just wedging that freaking string spreader out in there, and I know
that's the worst tool. You put in your pocket, but I've got one too.
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm not driving back to town. I'm doing this right here.
Butter knife, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think one time I used a dime, and that was just big enough for me to get my string spreader in there. But eventually I got my string spreader in there, but I used the dime because it was just a little narrower and it wasn't sharp. But my string didn't look good after that.
Now they have to call somebody. New string, 'cause I'm an idiot.
Yeah, hopefully if Austin's listening to that, it wasn't your string, dude. So I kind of want to go over some more aspects of the shooting, of the shooter's process here. Punching the trigger would be obviously probably number one for me.
Right.
We've kind of gone over this stuff in previous podcasts, but is that something that you're seeing out there quite a bit? Is guys punching the trigger?
Yeah, I see a lot of guys that I've known for years love them to death, and
a lot of times they don't even know they're doing it.
Nope, or they do know and just haven't. It's a process. If you want to stop punching the trigger, you got to go down the road.
Right. So what would be some steps for you to fix something like that?
I was a puncher for a long time because that's how we're all trained.
That's how I did it.
You go to the bow shop, you load it up, you put the dot on it, and then you start squeezing the trigger. And then that squeeze becomes not a squeeze down the road. So I shot a finger trigger wrist strap release like most people did for years and years until I first got my first thumb button, and then I hammered that for a few years until target panic just bit me bad. And so then I bought a hinge release and really focused on learning how to use it. And it probably took 3 months of really not shooting a target, but just learning how to shoot the release before I was pretty confident in it.
The hinge.
Yeah.
I felt like the hinge for me was one of the best things I've ever personally done in archery. It wasn't just it actually got me on the next level of actual archery. And when I personally used a hinge, it spilt over into using my wrist rocket. Just the training that you're doing to your brain, the process that you're developing, it's like spilling over in all the other areas of my shot process. Aiming got better, way better. Target panic was pretty much eliminated. I'm not going to say that the release did it, because a lot of it, the release helps.
Yes.
But you have to be conscious and aware and actually actively working on it to better it, in my opinion. But that hinge was, I'm not going to say a cure-all, but it was definitely, for me, a game changer.
Yep. And after I got good with mine, or I'm not going to say good, but after I got confident shooting mine, now I could go back to a thumb button and execute it awesome compared to how I was doing it before, and it was a total eye-opener.
So I guess I'd be curious, because I've got some guys that are using hinges. What were some of the challenges when you started using hinge? Because for me, it was anchor, and that was the biggest problem I had.
Well, shooting a thumb button before, it uses, for me, the same anchor. The first two knuckles on your first two fingers are at the crease of your jaw, and it doesn't go anywhere. So the anchor stayed the same. It was figuring out the hand angle, and there's so much information and misinformation on the internet and videos, and back in the day it was archery talk on the forum, and there's so much bad information from just random dudes, but you take it all in,
right?
And then you gotta try it out, and either it works or it don't. You gotta be quick enough to figure out what does and what don't.
I would be curious to hear how you get your hand angle.
Because I know the flatter I get it, the faster it's going to go off, because I get maximum leverage on it. And I don't know that I like that necessarily, but sometimes that's just where it ends up, and I'm not going to maybe not shoot the arrow if it's holding good, but it's critical to get pretty much consistent all the time.
So I had some questions with handhelds and D-loops the other day. I'll throw them your way. Is does the type of hinge, the angle of the claw or the direction of the claw matter?
I don't feel like it does. A guy I know did a YouTube video here, it's probably been a year ago now, on hand angle relative to D-loop, because there was a big kind of a discussion about torqueless D-loops versus standard D-loops, and came to find out that for him at 100 yards, it really didn't make no difference.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, I guess I'd be interested in hearing, because I imagine in my head, and I'm just asking this question for me personally, in my head, if you had a really short, wide D-loop, and then you're cranking an angle on that, would that matter more than a torqueless or a longer D-loop that's narrower? Because to me,
it makes sense in my head that it would affect it more.
Yeah.
I have not personally experimented with it.
Yeah, neither have I. Maybe that's something for me to try and experiment with. But that's been a common thing with those handhelds, is like, for guys that haven't used them, they're like, well, I'm twisting the shit out of my D-loop. That's got to be doing something to my string. I'm like, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it either.
Yeah. But in my head, it would make sense, because you're inducing, like, just basically you're twisting that string kind of at an angle.
And then it's going to throw the arrow just a little bit.
Yeah, to me it makes sense. But they also do make handhelds, and I don't know what they're called. I'm sure you could probably think of the model I'm talking about here, that have a pivoting claw. And so for guys that are worried about that eliminates it.
It does, but it doesn't, because the pivoting claw, usually it's either locked down or the pivot mechanism inside it isn't smooth enough to let it naturally come to position.
While it's at pressure?
Yeah.
Really? I didn't know that. What one am I talking about there? Do you know what release that is?
True Ball used to make one that was what model was it? I've got one at home, naturally. And you were supposed to lock it down, but if you left the screws just a little bit loose, it would pivot naturally.
That's cool.
Kind of. And but that's really the only one I can think of. The rest of them are like you can move them, but they have to be locked down.
That's interesting. Yeah, see, I haven't played with all those handhelds like you have or anything, but so we've gone over kind of the anchoring. What if I'm having a hard time anchoring and finding my anchor? What could be some problems there?
Just not really focusing on it, I guess I feel. Because that's like the number one critical step in archery is having a consistent anchor.
Right. I've seen guys, maybe draw lengths might add to it. Into it. Would a short or long draw length in your mind give you a certain type of misanchoring or tough time anchoring, or would there be any way to identify if your draw is too long or too short?
Well, if it's too long, you're going to obviously be behind your head, so your anchor is not even going to really be there. You're always going to be in the valley of the bow if you are pulling it back. Too short, you depending on how much tension you've got in your bow arm, it could pull you off your anchor if you're not paying attention.
So too short, would the string and the nose, would there be any signs right there?
Possibly if your nose isn't getting to your string, but then everybody's face is different. There's a lot of people that doesn't get the nose to the string so heavily recommended.
Really?
And then you get your draw length to where your nose on the string, everything feels natural. And then you play with your D-loop length to get to your anchor point.
I've heard of guys doing that. And I've also heard, and I've heard it, I forget where I picked this up from. And to be able to actually describe it accurately is probably above me. But so there's your draw length, and then there's there's that, and then there's your D-loop length.
Right.
And I've heard those are two different things.
Absolutely.
Would you mind covering that for me? Because I heard that once, and it intrigued the hell out of me.
So I guess if you look at a picture of yourself sideways at full draw, the knock of the arrow should be directly below your eyeball. Roughly. That's going to get your nose on the string, everything lined up where it's supposed to be. Well, then if your D-loop's too short, you might get into a high elbow situation where you can't really get back into your anchor. Then too long of a D-loop would be opposite, where you'd already be expanded all the way out, so you've got nowhere to go.
It'd be hard to get back tension on there.
Yes. So you got to find your D-loop length to get your anchor to your draw length.
That's interesting. So I guess your D-loop would be your anchoring position.
Yes.
And your draw length would actually, it's pretty much your draw length. I mean, but it would place the arrow where that arrow needs to be, and then the D-loop would place your anchoring hand where it needs to be.
Correct.
And I've always heard that, and it's really intrigued me. And I haven't really actually played with the D-loop lengths too much.
Right.
Hardly at all. I always try and keep mine really, really short and neat.
Right.
But I remember when I think it was the first year you and I shot league with you, because you've been doing it way longer than I have, obviously. Your D-loop, because your bow wasn't, I think it was maxed out or something.
Yeah, it was too short, and I'd already twisted the cables and everything to get more draw length out of it, and it was still too short.
Yeah.
I didn't want to spend money on cams and strings at the moment because I wasn't sure what I was going to do for the future, so long D-loop.
Yeah, you had like it had to be 2 inches.
It was 1.5 inches solid.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, what in the hell is he doing?
But the arrows went in the middle when I did my shot.
Yeah, it worked. I guess that's in its own way a torqueless D-loop. Huh?
Yeah, at that point, yeah.
So I've always wanted to ask you or John that. I'm like, that's really intriguing, because I heard, was it Chris from Spot Hog was talking to John about that one day. And then John was talking to me about it. I'm like, that's freaking cool. Like, I didn't think about that.
And then imagine going from brand A to brand Y of bow, where 29 inches may not be 29 inches as far as specs go. Because I went from, let's see, I started shooting Hoyt at 28.5. I finished at 29.25. Then I went to Matthews, and now I'm at 29 for my outdoor bow, 29.5 for my indoor bow. But
I was talking to somebody one of my buddies, Mike Batiste, and I was talking about the Matthews running a little bit long.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been doing his bow reviews, his own bow reviews this year. And I was talking to him about it. And he's like, actually, have you draw tested them this year? I'm like, I haven't had a chance to do any of that. And he's like, they're actually coming in pretty damn close this year.
Nice.
The ones that he's testing, the Traverse and all those.
I still haven't got to shoot a Traverse. I've been wanting to, but I have not.
It's a nice bow. I thought it was going to kick the Ultra's butt this year. Whether it has or hasn't, I haven't really been paying attention that much. But I'm like, that could be the death of the Hoyt Ultra. Like, whatever that may be for folks out there. But, because if I shot both of them, I feel like I'd get way more performance out of the Traverse. If I could get the Traverse with the Traverse backstop, back wall, and the Hoyt's draw, that would be a great bow.
Was the Ultra that good of a draw?
I loved it. I mean, the Hoyt's always had a pretty damn good smooth draw. It never feels like you're pulling the actual poundage you are. I always feel like I'm pulling 3 or 4 pounds less than I really am with a Hoyt. With the Matthews bows, since the Halon, I feel like I'm pulling every pound and I'm earning it.
Right.
And I just don't like the back walls on the Hoyts. They're always, for me, they're always spongy.
Yeah.
So, but that's a rabbit hole right there in itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you kind of hit on it a second ago, and you were kind of talking about the bow arm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to include the shoulder forward on that. So I'm talking about the actual arm and shoulder that are that are being used on the bow, not on your anchoring arm. What are some problems that you see with the bow arm? Because I hear you want to have it fully extended and arm, and then 45, and then I'm like, you want to have it slightly relaxed on your elbow, and then there's so many things out there from a target archer. What have you found to be the best principle for you, and what is there a general principle altogether for that?
The generals that I can figure out is, if your bow shoulder wants to creep up where it's not being down and relaxed, when it creeps up, your pin's going to want to hold at 6 o'clock. It's going to be hard to get it up to the middle of the dot, just because everything just rides up and then your body compensates for it. So a relaxed shoulder is almost mandatory. And then I guess in my bow arm, if you've got unnecessary tension in it, when the shot breaks, you can have a tendency to kick it off to the left, or tension's just not a good thing.
Makes sense. I've always struggled for years. I struggled with a weak bow shoulder on the left. I've got 2 not so great shoulders now, but I would hang low, and it felt like the weight of the world was on my bow, and I could not get it. It was to the point where I was adding a yard or 2.
Right.
That's this way I'm going to have to shoot. And really, I started working out and everything, and getting a little bit better shape, and I strengthened that shoulder a little bit. And then the second thing is I also learned about the front shoulder and the rules that it plays, and if that breaks down, it's like that. Have you seen Tropic Thunder? Mm-hmm. Have you seen that quote? It was like, if he breaks down, we break down.
Yep.
It's like that.
Exactly. Your shoulder is that guy.
It is that guy. And that front shoulder, gosh, that is a killer for a lot of guys out there. And I struggle, and I still struggle with the front shoulder today, because now not only am I aware of it, but in my shot process, I've naturally come up high with my shoulder now because I shot like that for years.
Right.
So if you watch me shoot long enough, you'll see on some shots I'm either going to let down, or I'll just lower that and then consciously lower that shoulder down.
Right.
And, I'm not a big fan of changing shit during your shot process, so the best thing's probably just let down and restart. But if I don't have that time, or if I feel like I can get through my shot process, I will you'll see me lower that front shoulder down. That'll pull the bow a little bit forward, and then I can execute my shot.
I'm not sure if it's a let-off deal, because, we're getting higher and higher let-offs now, where you can get 90% let-off in some bows. Whereas when you're relaxing all that tension, if you're wanting to come up with this, because now you're not holding the bow up anymore.
Yeah. It's a good point.
I don't know if it's a let-off deal or not, but it goes through my head sometimes.
It very well could be. And I know mine is just that's what, without knowing any better, when in the beginning, that's how I shot, and then I wouldn't stop shooting. That's
Right.
another thing. I believe you can shoot too many arrows,
sure.
and I've done that, and I effed both my shoulders up in the process of doing that. And overtraining is a real thing. I honestly do believe that with a bow, anyways. What are some signs that you have a weak front shoulder and that maybe you should start working on it outside of what we just talked about?
Usually just holding below the target. And you'll feel it eventually if you shoot enough arrows that way where, your body's telling you that something ain't right.
Right. One thing that I know in my own personal experience is when my front shoulder starts going, it's like we break down kind of thing. Then my shot execution obviously is going to break down because I'm hanging below the target. But another thing is I will keep pulling with back tension with my shoulder. I'll start bringing my elbow around, and then my front shoulder will start creeping in towards my neck, and that bow will not go off.
Right.
It will not go off. It's like, God damn it. Like, go off. Why aren't you going off? And then pretty soon I'm like, my shoulder's almost up by my freaking chin. It's like, okay.
Start
Let down.
over.
Yes. Or just quit shooting.
Right. Because the more gassed you are, the easier it is to get in that situation.
Yeah. And so I guess some things that I would go over is collapsing on the shot. Would you expand on collapsing on the shot? Because for me, that is, if you were watching that, you would probably see that that's part of collapsing on a shot is your shoulders are coming together, but they're coming together on the front side, not on the back side.
To me, collapsing on the shot means more like you've just gave up on it, where you've been aiming so long and you think you're pulling correctly, but maybe you're pulling straight through rather than rotating. And so, like when you shoot a dip bang, it's sitting in the middle, and then all of a sudden it starts bobbing out the bottom. But you're still pulling because you're still trying to execute a good shot. Well, it's going to go off usually when it's below what you're aiming at. And so to me, that's a collapse. It's a mental collapse.
Okay.
Because you gave up on the shot, but you're thinking, man, why hasn't it went off by now? And boom. Yeah, it's low.
Okay. So that for you is collapsing on the shot. Okay. What I'm describing here is it looks like, okay, so there's really old folks that their shoulders start getting sucked in, their head moves down towards where their throat should be, kind of thing. That to me is kind of looks like it's collapsing on. I see it quite a bit where guys are just kind of going like this, and then they're just pulling and pulling and pulling, and then that head gets lower and lower, and I guess that could be contributed to draw as well, but I see that where maybe in their front, and then they're about to get taken off the back wall.
Right.
And to me, that I always thought that was collapsing on the shot, but
Potato.
Yeah, very well. I mean, we're pretty much describing the same thing, the same problem here.
Right.
But I'll start seeing them getting pulled off the wall. I'll start seeing that shoulder get basically, they'll come together kind of like they're becoming a taco.
Right.
And shit's breaking down. So for guys that maybe are collapsing on the shot, is there a way to fix that? I imagine draw length and then maybe working on that front shoulder.
Probably, we could all probably use more exercise, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, the better shape you're in, the easier it is to maintain good posture and execute a good shot. Or maybe your shot process is just taking too long. Maybe you're just over aiming. That's another good one where you're just trying to force the pin to get where you want it to be, and so it takes forever for you to go through your shot.
Right. Well, I know when my front shoulder starts getting weak on me, I'll hang low and then I'll shoot high. You know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's like you're talking about that pin's just dipping 6 o'clock, and then as soon as it gets down low, your body's anticipating. I think it's archery.
Yep.
And like you said, archery happens. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Archery happened. And then as soon as that comes down, your body reacts and it pulls up and you go off, and then you're pushing that arrow high out of there.
And you're probably pulling your anchor off your face.
Yeah, that's target panic and a bunch of other shit happening there. For me, I'm just kind of picking my own self apart. For me, that happens when I shoot too much. I guess what's another thing that you would see out there? I guess elbow placement on the anchoring arm. I see that one quite a bit. guys aren't coming straight back kind of thing, or they're not wrapping it around. Do you see that much, kind of the chicken wing?
Occasionally, but from what I've learned from helping T out, is she's short from her elbow to her grip position.
Really?
So she cannot be behind her head. She's chicken winged all the time.
Really?
So it's just, I told her, I said, that's something you absolutely have to focus on every time, is maintaining a good anchor and not moving your release hand, because with that body shape, you're going to be more susceptible to pulling off your face.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So how does she execute a shot with that then?
I believe at this point, she's just getting her pinky and index finger wrapped around, or ring finger wrapped around it, and just slowly squeezing that back.
Interesting. So when I started using, and for a lot of guys are starting to use these handheld releases, and so we're talking mainly about handheld releases today. Back when I started using my hinge, I was just trying to figure it out. There's so many. The hard thing about a hinge is figuring out what lane you're in.
Right.
For me, I tried doing all sorts of different shit because I don't care. I'm learning how to use it. So I'm pulling with my back, pulling with my my shoulder, pulling with my elbow, relaxing my hand. I'm trying all sorts of different shit. Getting it to go off with my wrist, changing the where I guess length of hold. So I'm changing where the release is on my fingers, changing wrist position as far as angle. I'm trying all sorts of shit. And mainly I was struggling with length, draw length change, because when I'm relaxing my hand, that release is going farther towards the front of my face.
Right.
Is that, to me, that seems like a common issue from the guys that I've seen shoot. They're struggling, and I think when they're saying they're struggling with their anchor, it's because that peep is getting pulled away from their face during their shot. What are some things that a guy can do to fix that?
It almost sounds like in that situation where your hand's getting longer to the point where you can notice it before it goes
right.
off.
Yeah.
There might be just a little bit of a hand position issue, because it should almost be imperceptible.
Really?
If you're doing a relax release technique.
Yeah.
You should feel your hand getting longer, but it shouldn't be like, holy shit, it's a 1/4 inch longer now, and I'm already halfway through the valley. It's going to go any time now.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's, I just feel like maybe you're also giving it up with your elbow maybe a little bit at the same time.
Possible.
Where if you maintain your good back tension and you're holding solid and you just relax a little bit, it should be gone.
That's the one thing that we could build off of right there is relaxing on the shot, because I see Del Colo pointed it out to me when I was in one of the shoot-offs this year. He's like, dude, relax. Relax your hand. What are you doing? Like, and I felt like I was relaxed, but he's like, your hand is like white.
Like, and you see the veins in your forearm standing out.
Yeah. And these are things that I don't, people point out something I'm doing wrong. I don't give a shit unless you're wrong about it, and then I'll just brush it off. But I mean, the guys that really know, like you, DeCalo, John, when you guys point something out, and I'm not a snob. If I don't know you and you point something out, I'm going to take a look at it, but I'm not going to take it as seriously as if you or Carl, right, or Hugh or Del Colo, Carl or John or somebody, somebody that I know.
Right.
But when he pointed that out, I'm like, God, I didn't even know I was doing that. And a lot of these things that we're pointing out are probably subconscious. Like going back to
and it's totally mental, because you're trying as hard as it's been possible to do this,
right?
And so you're just into it 140%. And
well, you already got right what I changed on when I was noticing how far forward the release was going, was wrapping that elbow more around my head, getting the elbow to kind of get the angle of the hinge to go off. And then also relaxing. So those were the two things that fixed that. And so I'm just going over things that I know that I've struggled with, that I've been getting messages on.
Right.
Trying to knock them out. I don't care. People know, the stupid things I've done. So
we've all done stupid shit. You got to learn somehow.
You do. So what would be another thing that you have seen? And I know we're getting into an hour here, and there's a lot of things I could talk about. But what would be something else that you see on the range that happens quite a bit, if anything?
Man, there's not a whole lot. Of course, we run with totally different people, and
right.
the I guess the window of experience you see out there is from brand new people, which is awesome, to world champions, and everybody's just out there to have fun and shoot arrows, but it's
Right.
drastically different between some people's.
Well, not everybody's built the same.
Nope. And
You know?
that's the hardest part to deal with in archery, I feel like, is no two body shapes are identical. So you got to find the variables that will work. And
So I guess to echo off that, I mean, if you have, the Cam Haynes who the thumbs behind the neck, I mean, and I'm guessing that's probably just from trying to get longer draw lengths back when bows didn't have speeds hardly at all. And
it was a good anchor for a wrist strap.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very solid anchor. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
And you can get a little bit more on your draw when you do
sure.
that, and so, but is that proper by anybody's means? I mean, probably not. I mean, he shoots better than the average guy, way better than the average guy. I've seen him shoot. But some of these archery snobs are like, yeah, what's he doing, kind of thing. But I'm like, well, he's probably going to outshoot 90% of the people So is he wrong?
No. I don't feel like there's anything wrong about how people shoot arrows if you can find how you can do it consistently every time.
Yeah. And I like using him as an example because he's well known.
Right.
He's in his own lane, and I see a lot of other guys that new to archery. I've got some buddies who don't really shoot anymore, but when they were shooting, they were definitely. I think RJ was one good friend of mine. He would shoot with that thumb behind his neck. I'm like, where'd you learn that? And obviously, he was Cameron Haynes and everything, and cool, good, man. If that works for you, and I've tried the thumb behind the neck after seeing Cameron do it back a long time ago, and I liked it when I tried it. I eventually stuck to what I knew, but I didn't find any actually legitimately concerns with it or any problems with it.
No negatives to it.
No, not really. And so I guess where I'm going with this is, and you hear me saying this all the time, is find your lane inside the track of the foundations, and follow it. If it works for you, why do something that works for Levi Morgan if that's not going to work for you?
Absolutely.
Right. So outside of that, with the shooter's positions or the shot process and everything, I was really wanting to pick your brain on that because from a target archer, you're more in depth about it than I am, and especially on the bow tuning aspect of it. Is there anything with the arrow setups that you see guys maybe getting wrong, or anything there before we wrap this thing up?
No, just most guys are going to shoot a pretty normal spine arrow. Most of the guys I know are shooting anywhere from 55 to 60 pounds, and so you're going to see 380s to 420s in that spine range, and that's pretty much what it is.
Makes sense. And then one more question for you. Because I was doing a review of The Reckoning, and I'll probably do it today while we're at the shop. As I'll actually record it. I was kind of fascinated that they're calling that a crossover bow. I can totally see how it is a crossover bow because I haven't figured out whether I like it or whether it's ugly yet. I'm kind of in between because when I look at it, I'm like, that's different. It's kind of cool, but I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, that bitch is ugly.
Right.
Like, I don't know about that bow yet, but the technologies that's in it, I'm actually pretty excited to do this review because I think for a guy that doesn't have a press, they're making it easier for a guy to do it himself.
Sure.
And I'm a big fan of that. So the cam lock technology, I think that's cool shit.
Right.
But going back to that, where I was going with the whole bow, the let off is about between performance and comfort. It's about 80 to 82% let off. They're saying, but if it's a crossover bow, target archers, in my experience, very limited experience, I don't target archery. You do, is the guys like a lower let off.
Correct.
So they're calling it a crossover bow, but they're keeping guys at that 80% let off.
Well, there's a lot more of them that's getting to be about 75. In fact, my TRX 38s are available with an 80% let off.
Are they really?
But I stay on the 70% side because I know if I shoot a high let off bow, I get very lazy in the shot because I don't have to work to hold the bow back. And then that spirals.
Yeah. I've heard that it's lower let off allows you to hold steadier. Is that true? Is that
Well, I guess the flip side of that is you can put more weight on your stabilizers because you're holding more bow back with your release hand, and it makes it easier to stabilize. But at the same time, higher let off, it's, to me, easier to move the bow around.
Yeah. To me, it would tire me out quicker, which is okay because you'll build up endurance. But at the same time, I tend to pull hard against the back walls anyways because I've shot pretty aggressive bows quite often.
Right.
And so I will actually steer myself off the target. Can you talk about steering yourself off the target?
Oh, man. I'm not a big puller. I tend to just try to stay relaxed and kind of push the bow where I want it to go. If you're steering off the target, it's got to be tension.
Yeah, it's got to be. Because I know when I'm steering myself off the target back, like when I was shooting the RX-1, it was a turbo. And I think it's the most shootable turbo they've came out with yet. It was not very, had a good valley. Still was more aggressive than other bows, but wouldn't pull me off the back wall like a Spider Turbo would.
Right.
But where I'm going with that is this is something that it would be hard to see if somebody was doing something wrong. So I'll just tell people what I've struggled with here is steering the bow. Basically, you're pulling so hard against the back wall that you're going to start pulling yourself off. And typically, when I notice myself doing that, I'm pulling myself off from left to right at about a 3 to 4 o'clock. I'm kind of just pulling myself off like that. And it's really hard for me to identify because I'm not behind the peep. I'm not, the one shooting it. But I've always wondered because when I shoot those more aggressive bows with a lower let off, to me, I struggle more.
Absolutely.
And so I guess I was just wondering, why target archers like that 60. It used to be 65%, right?
Yep. And then a lot of guys that even put bigger cables in it to get more let off.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, these are all things that I've personally wondered, and having someone like you that I could pick your brains, like, why do they do that shit?
Right.
Yuck. I remember when I asked John Rains, I'm like, why do you guys use those stupid long retarded stabilizers? It looks so stupid. And he's like, yeah,
right.
If they didn't help, do you think pros wouldn't be using them?
Absolutely
I was
not.
like, you got a good point there, John. I retract my statement. And so there's always a reason that if you see something, there's probably a reason for it. And having a guy that's in the fight actually doing it, shooting competition, it's always nice to okay, why are they doing this?
Right.
And so one more question that we talked, I think before we were actually recording, is with bow sights, you and I may be off base here because I'm not around it like you are, but it seemed like a few years ago they were the dovetails were so far from the compounds, and now I'm starting to see more and more and archery pictures and videos that I'm seeing where they're sucking in those dovetails even though they used to be way far out. Now they seem like they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Am I wrong?
No. There's still a lot of guys running them full length, but some of them are running them half, and just
why is the trend seem for me, and maybe it's not even a trend, it's just something I've been noticing that's not actually true, is why does it seem like there's a trend where they're sucking those in towards the riser? Because for me it would be pin float would be less noticeable or less I guess ecstatic. It'd be more shaky out there. It'd be like shooting on 9 power.
Right.
If your dovetails all the way out. To me, my thought would be, and I've been sucking my dovetails in, is it's just easier to execute a shot because that pin isn't as sporadic out there. Elaborate on that for me, I guess.
About the only thing that to me I used let's start over on that. About the only thing I ever used a dovetail for is to get my scope housing to be inside my peep and to be able to center it up.
That's the only thing.
That's the only thing. I'll run it all the way out if I have to, or halfway, or.
What about so explain pin gap on that, and then also arrow clearance.
Pin gap, arrow clearance. So pin gap, the closer you get the scope to the bow, which bringing it back in on the dovetail, will let you shoot farther because it's shrinking in the pin gap. So, like, I know a couple people that will shoot with it in the extended position until they have to shoot 100 yards or whatever. Then they got to pull it back in and be able to shoot that far while aiming.
Okay.
Otherwise, you get into an arrow clearance situation where the scope's too low and the arrow is going to not be very friendly to your scope housing.
Right. So if I want to shoot farther out on the dovetail, what would be? Is there any benefit outside of alignment for your housing?
You know, they say that the farther apart your two aiming at pieces are, it makes it a little more accurate, like old long barrel muskets and stuff like that. But to each their own.
Okay.
Yeah. Your road.
So you could shoot longer range if you suck that thing in.
Absolutely.
So when you do that, would you have to would it just be to suck it in for that long shot because your pin gaps would change?
Right.
So you just can't change willy-nilly.
No.
You'd have to know.
Have it set for this is what this is for and this is what this is for, and I would write it down.
Yeah. So basically, when my thing's fully extended and I'm dialed to 60, sucked in, maybe that 60 turns into an 80.
Or 90 or 100.
Or 90 or 100, and you'd have to know ahead of time. That makes sense. If you look at my cheat sheet on the side of my housing, I got a little cheat sheet there.
Right.
So, any more words of wisdom from Carl?
You know, if I had to tell anybody to do anything, write your shot sequence down. Have it just dialed, and don't be afraid to look back over it once in a while if something's going astray.
Yeah. So run through your shot sequence for me before we wrap this thing up here.
Let's see. Feet position, alignment to the target. You know, relax, take a good breath, load an arrow, clip my release on the D-loop, find my hand position, draw the bow, anchor, relax, and focus. And then my shot thought is finish the shot. So that just keeps me pulling and focusing on the middle.
Really? Mm-hmm. So mine's pretty similar to that. To finish this thing up, I'll wrap up my shot sequences is stance. I focus on my front foot, making sure that it's far enough out that because I used to stand. I used to have my weight on all my weight on my back foot, and so now I'm just making sure that I'm evenly evenly footed, and everything feels really stable. I make sure that I'm kind of an open stance, so both my feet aren't pointed perpendicular. They're kind of an open stance, like the toe is. And then I put basically the bow on my leg a lot of times. What you call preloading. I'll preload my grip. I really, really focus and use my breathing throughout the shot. So I take a big, deep breath in, kind of like I'm lifting weights, and you exhale on the thing. So I take a really big, deep breath in, and then as if I'm lifting, when I draw my bow, I'm breathing out slightly, slowly, controlled. And then on that same breath, I'll let the rest of it out right when I start looking and aiming and aligning. And then I'll take another deep breath in, and then I'm exhaling really slowly out during my shot process. Because when I found, me personally, when I struggle, if I reach the end of my breath and then I'm breathing back in, my shot sucks.
Right.
Sucks. Like that transition from where you're breathing out to back in, that just changes the way your body's it just changes your chest.
Yep.
And that it changes everything for me. So I always focus on my breath, and I'm always breathing out when I shoot. If I'm not breathing out when I shoot, I'm not shooting. I mean, it's that big of a deal for me. I can't do it. I don't know why. Do you focus on your breathing or
not really? But I think I'm a breath holder.
Really?
Yep. I think I just breathe in, come to anchor, and then hold it.
Really?
Until it's gone. Yeah.
I'm always breathing, and if I don't get that shot doesn't go off, if the shot doesn't go off and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to, I should let down. But if I don't let down, I'll breathe in really deep, really quickly, and then I'll breathe back in. I never shoot on the inhale.
Huh.
I just can't do it.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. Never done that. I don't know if that's people in general.
Right.
And then from there, it's just executing a good shot. And I'm thinking through my head. I'm just thinking, relax, relax, relax. It'll go, and pump, and then it goes off. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much mine. And my thing is relax. And then also, I'm always shooting back tension. I'm a puller. So I really don't have to work on that, but I'm always worried on wrapping my elbow back, and I'm trying to use my elbow to get the hinge to really make it go off.
Right.
Because if I'm doing that, I'm getting my back tension. But that's my shot process. I don't know if people can really if you can't break yours down, do what Carl said. Write it down. I never thought about that.
Yep.
And actually using that. That's a really good tip. So thanks for coming back onto the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
You and I are going to hit the range.
Yep.
So I'll probably get some critiquing and some learning from you there.
I could probably use some myself.
If you're not learning throughout the process, you're not going forward, man.
That's a fact.
I'm sure Levi Morgan's still learning.
Oh, yeah.
So, but outside of that, if you ever want to come back on the show, you ever got anything, always happy to have you. And for you guys listening, if you want to follow Carl, he's fun to follow because he's always shooting all the time. What's your Instagram handle?
Instagram is Carl the Archer.
Carl the Archer. Any spaces in between or anything?
I have to look. Where am I at? Carl _the _Archer.
Carl _ Okay, Carl _ the _Archer, all lowercase. And I enjoy following you, man. Seeing you shoot your 300 a couple years ago at Vegas was pretty freaking sweet.
And I did it again this year.
Yeah,
But that was the easiest one I've ever shot.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Hopefully there's many more of them in my near future.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh, I'm sure there are. And you shot a 1501 this year at Redding, which
Yeah.
I know you're not happy with that. I would be freaking lit if I did that. Everybody would know.
The weird part is the very first year I shot freestyle, I shot a 1502.
Uh-huh.
And so I was like, wow, this game's easy.
Uh-huh.
Well, those are famous last words when you start thinking that way, because then after that I shot a 1469. It was a wreck. And then I shot a 1489 last year. And then, 4 years ago I shot a 1510, which is my best.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know one this year.
Well, learn and grow, and I think we'll be in the shoot-offs here in the next couple of years.
I'm hoping.
Yeah. So, all right, brother. Well, let's go ahead and shoot to the range, and appreciate you coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Garrett.
All right. See you, dude.
Yep.